there, freedom lover. Welcome to the Mortgages and Mimosas podcast, where we empower single women just like you to intentionally buy your first house so you can accelerate your path to financial freedom. I am your hostess, Nobu Musikiwa. I am so excited to hang out with you today. Let's get started. I made $250,000, so $250,000 in 18 months from buying my very first house. How did that happen exactly? I bought a house that 99% of first-time home buyers would never want to buy because it just seems like it would be stressful, which it is. But I specifically bought a house that needed to be completely renovated from top to bottom. Now, before you hop off and you say, well, I don't have money to renovate a whole house, I don't have 100K, 200K just sitting in the bank. I did not either. In fact, I was making $48,000 a year in New York City when I bought this house. And so I didn't have the cash to do a renovation either. But what I did have was a little bit of some tenacity and ability to do some research. And I found a loan called an FHA 203K loan. And that is what I used to buy my very first house. Now, this 203K loan is pretty amazing. It is a mortgage loan that takes into account how much you're buying the house for. So let's say you're buying a house for $100,000. And then it also takes into account how much you need to renovate this house, whatever it is that you want to do. So let's say it's $100,000 to renovate this house. And then you're going to get just one mortgage. So you're going to get how much you paid for the house and then how much it is to renovate this house. And then they just put that into one loan and it's a mortgage and you just have one monthly payment every single month at that same interest rate that you had for just a regular house. So you pretty much get all the funds to do all the renovations that you need and wrap it into a mortgage and take 30 years to buy it. So it is absolutely just not 30 years to buy it, 30 years to pay it off. So it is absolutely amazing. And even though this program, in terms of the ability to increase your net worth quickly, right? If you buy strategically, this loan is amazing. But there were definitely a few hiccups with going from the very beginning to being able to actually finish the whole project of renovating a whole house. So I'll be going over 4 major things that caused a little bit of drama in my life, actually a lot of drama at the time with getting this mortgage done. I absolutely would still get a 203K loan. Absolutely. So this loan, this 203K mortgage is the very first one that I did, but I absolutely would be willing to do it again despite all the hiccups that I went through. So before I get into it, let me know in the chat. Do you want to be part of the 99% that's going to just do things the easy way and roll with it? Or be part of the 1% that's going to put in the extra work and consider this 203K loan or anything else that is going to put you ahead of your peers and get you a little bit closer to that financial freedom that you are looking for, all from buying your very first house. So let me know in the chat, 99 or 1%. I know I am part of that 1%. I am going to do whatever I can to move a little bit faster and not be a sheep. So let me, before we get into all my drama with this 203K loan, let me go over the numbers for you just for a little bit of context, so you see just how much of a difference it can be with just taking the path that's a little bit harder. So the house that I bought is a three-family house. It's a multi-family. So it's one building and there are 3 units in that building. The prices for houses like that in the neighborhood at the time that I bought were around $550 to $500. I was able to buy the house. So in terms of how much I paid for the building itself, for 200, it was 206. And then I added the renovation costs of $98,000. So the total loan that I had to get was about a little bit over $300,000. And so by the time that I finished renovating the whole house, which took longer than expected, we'll get into that. Once everything was fixed up and the house was live-in condition again, right? Then the value went up to that 500 to 550. So I was able to make that 250K in about 18 months, which is the time it took to get this house up and running. So that's what the numbers look like today. That same house, and then 3 families in the neighborhood, the cheapest you'll find is around 800, 850, 900 is going rate for that. So from the time that I bought that house at 300K that I put into that deal to now, that building has gone up in value by $500,000. And that is positive impact to my net worth that would have taken a lot faster if I was trying to just save up money from working at my job. So this is why I absolutely love buying multifamily properties. And buying specifically places that need work. It doesn't have to be a full on major project like this one, but going this route is definitely beneficial. So let's talk through the 4 major hurdles with this 203K loan. The first thing was just understanding what the whole process was. So initially, I wasn't trying to get a house that needed a full renovation because I don't have a contracting background. I knew nothing about building houses, buying houses. This was my very, very first house. But as I was looking at houses, I was seeing a lot of places that were newly renovated and for sale. And I started noticing that the last sale price was way lower than the price that they were trying to sell this for. So this was in New York City. So I was seeing places where um they were selling the places for 700, 750, but then the last sale price that you can see in whatever whether you're using Zillow, Trulia, Realtor, you can see that the price history, the property sale history, they bought this house for 200,000 4 months ago. And I saw so many properties like this. And so I thought, well, if this company can find a house for 200K and then fix it up themselves and then sell it, why can't I find a house for 200K as well and then fix it up myself and then just keep it and not have to pay them the extra money? So I started trying to figure out how I could actually do a whole renovation without having money. Because remember, fam, I was making 48K a year. I did not have money to do a renovation. And I happened to find a random article or post in a forum about somebody that mentioned this 203K loan. The name of the forum is Brownstoner. It is a forum for so in New York, we have these brownstones where a lot of them are historical buildings, so you can't do major renovations or there's restrictions. So it's like people buy them and then they try to fix them, but they need someone that can handle this type of building specifically. So Brownstoner, check it out. But I found a random article or random post on this Brownstoner about this 203K loan thing. And then just finding information about it was just harrowing. So if you're here because you are trying to do a 203K loan, if you have seen any resources that are helpful, drop them in the chat so that anybody that is watching this can learn from where you have found information as well. It's kind of like we can crowdsource all the details. But I just found bits and pieces of the internet, and the most helpful resource for me was actually the HUD site. So just trying to figure out how the process works was like the big thing for me. And pretty much there are 2 types of 203K loans you can get. You can either get a streamlined 203K or a standard 203K. So the standard 203K loan, let's actually start with the streamline. Streamline 203K loan, there is, I think, a 30 something $1,000 cap. You have to go into the details and check, but it's a lot easier to manage a project. You don't need a contractor. You just get the lump sum of the money to fix it directly to you. You don't need to, there's less hurdles to get this project done, but there is a cap to how much you can borrow. So I did a standard 203K loan. So because I needed to completely redo a house. So I don't know if I described the house, but there was siding missing. There were holes in the wall. There was this crazy smell throughout the whole building. I don't know what the smell was. It was completely not livable at all. It was so not livable, right? The siding missing, that you could not get a regular loan for this house. So it specifically stipulated, the listing specifically stipulated, that you either had to use cash to buy this house, or you had to have a renovation loan that was ready to go. So I had a renovation loan. I had a renovation loan that was ready to go. So that's how I was able to get the house. So I did the standard 203K loan, which means that uh, you're borrowing more than that 30K. It also means that you have to get a 203K consultant. And this is somebody that isn't, it's a independent contractor, and their job is to go to your site and to make sure that everything that is on your list of things that need to get done are done. So this 203K consultant also makes up, he creates, or he or she creates a um like a project plan, if you will, that has a list of all the different things that need to get done, what the cost is, and that goes with the to the bank when you're applying for the loan. And that is what your contractor would then use after, and in combination with your consultant, to get paid. So with the standard 203K loan, you don't get the money all in one pop. So I didn't get 100K in my pocket after closing. So the bank actually holds the money. And then because it's a standard, there are draws. So the contractor has to do, let's say, demolish, XYZ walls. And once they do that, they can get like $10,000. But you don't have to worry about you being able to understand what has to happen first in order for the contractor to do what. That is a job of the consultant. The consultant will build out that list, the project list, and the pay, and how much each type of work is worth, in order for it to make sense on how the contractor gets paid. So that is the standard 203K loan, which is what I used. And not sure if I mentioned it, but the contractor doesn't get paid up front. So these draws only happen after work has been done. So contractor has to have the money to do the work up front, and that can be a barrier, which we're going to get to in a second. So it was hard to find information about this 203K loan. HUD was my most helpful resource. So if you're in a place where you're can't find information, go straight to the source. It's going to be helpful. So yes, next big issue for me. First was just understanding what the heck the process was. How do you get this loan? And then the next big issue was just finding a bank. I didn't anticipate it was gonna be hard. Once I figured out that the 203K loan was doable, I can get this mortgage to renovate a house that I want to buy. I didn't think that it was going to be hard to find a bank, and this was a lot of work and a little bit disappointing. There were so many banks that I called, so many lenders that I spoke to, and I told them the type of loan that I wanted. I told them the name of the loan, and they said I could not do that loan, right? They just completely lied. And the thing about me is I am a meticulous researcher. So I am not going to decide I'm going to do something without looking at it multiple times, double checking, triple checking, doing all these things to make sure that it's actually doable. So by the time I go to a lender, if I'm asking you, hey, like, do you do this loan? I know that it's doable. And I don't really care that this is your job and you have a license to do it, because it says I have done my research and I know I can do it. So I did not take no from the people that were saying that I couldn't do it, whether they were lying intentionally or they really didn't know about this loan. I don't know. But one lesson that I learned with this whole thing is that you need to do your research and know what you're trying to do before you go talk to anybody that's helping you with the house, because in the end, a lot of the people that you're working with work on commission. And so The people that are not so great could just lie to you to get them into the program that they have. So with all these lenders that said that I could not do a 203k loan, they were trying to push me into like a regular loan, which is not what I wanted. So just know your stuff before you talk to people, because you know, it also was New York City and everybody in New York is trying to hustle. So maybe it's just a New York thing. I don't know. But I talked to maybe 10, 15 different people who said that a 203k loan was not possible, which was just all lies. So what I ended up doing is I actually went to HUD directly and I found a list of the lenders in the state of New York who had recently originated a 203k loan. That was how I was able to find lenders that actually had done the mortgage. It's not common, not everybody does it. So again, maybe the people that said that I couldn't do it, maybe they genuinely just didn't know, but not all lenders do a 203k loan. So you have to find a lender that actually does it. And the easiest, what I ended up doing is just going to HUD directly, getting a list of the lenders that originated these loans recently, and then calling those different lenders to get a feel for who they were. This was my very first house, so I honestly didn't really have any set criteria at the time. I was just talking to people and just seeing if I liked them or not and going from there. So I had a list of banks from HUD, and then I didn't end up going with the bank so I had the list from HUD, but I also had additional banks that I found from my 203k contractor. So the next big hurdle was figuring out how to find a 203k contractor. Uh, and from first, my first level of research, right, just understanding the whole process, was learning that I needed a 203k contractor, a 203k, not contractor, 203k inspector, a 203k inspector, in order to um do this standard 203k loan that I was trying to do. So the inspector, their job, which I mentioned earlier, is to make sure that everything is done by your contractor correctly, and their job is to write up their inspection report to notate everything that needs to be done and the cost of doing all those things. And you don't have to pay the contractor out of your pocket, not the contractor, excuse me, the inspector, to do the draw inspections out of your pocket. It's actually built into your mortgage loan. So in order to find my contractor, in order to find my inspector, my 203k inspector, I I found a list of all the inspectors that were approved in the state of New York. And I looked through that list of inspectors and I just found the inspectors that had area codes that seemed like it was New York City directly. Now, there could have been others that did not have New York City area codes, but I didn't call them. I just called the ones that were that had New York City area codes. And a lot of them didn't answer. The few that did, I just asked them questions about how the whole process works. And I ended up going with a gentleman that seemed like he was the most helpful. And I also asked him what were the different banks that he recommended that did 203k loans, which was helpful. So I had my list of 203k lenders that I found on my own. Then I also had a list from him that I looked at, and I ended up going with a bank called a company, not a bank, a brokerage called Jersey Mortgage. They just seemed like they were moving faster with getting things done. So that's what I ended up going with. So doing all this, so finding the 203k inspector, finding the bank, I did all this before I even had a property. So I knew that I definitely wanted to do a major renovation on a building. I knew that I wanted a 3-family or bigger. I just didn't have one and I was looking for one. But I also didn't know anything about this whole process. So I wanted to make sure that I had everything in place so that when I found this house, I would be able to actually move forward with it. So I had my inspector on deck, but I had my inspector on deck ready to go once I found the once I found the building. I had my pre-approval now ready because I found a lender that was seemed to be good. More on that later. Um, and I had a decent idea of how the process worked. So that's where we are right now. So now, in terms of finding, oh, and then the contractor, right? So this this was probably the biggest problem for me was the contractor bit, and it really was a like a self I created this problem 100%. So, in terms of contractors, I actually asked my 203K inspector that I ended up going with. I asked him for a list of recommendations for contractors, and he actually gave me a few. And as I was talking to them, they already know the process. They know they don't get paid ahead of time. This is how they actually make money. And I ended up trying to find additional people that were not familiar with the program. I ended up going with somebody that was way cheaper, and that was just where I made a mistake. I really should have just made a decision from the contractors that the inspector recommended to me because they're already familiar with the program and they probably would have done a better job. But because I went with somebody else that was not familiar with the 203K loans, when we actually closed on the house and I went to talk to him about what to do next, he seemed to not know what he was doing. So imagine you're in this house, everything needs to be taken down, and he's saying the first thing, what tiles do you want? I'm like, sir, what are you talking about tiles? Like, we need to, you know demolish some walls here. And he was just delaying and not moving, so I ended up having to send him a notice that we're no longer working with him, and then went to find a new contractor. And the problem is, con with this particular loan, contractors have to put up their own money first and then get paid after. And for somebody that's not familiar with the 203K loan program and they don't understand it, it's going to be hard for you to convince them to do that as opposed to going to work with somebody that gives them their money up front. And so it was really hard to find a contractor that was good and understood the program and was willing to do the work and get paid later. uh, I ended up having to go through 4 contractors to finish the job. So the first guy didn't start at all. The second person uh, went through partially, but then we had major communication issues. And then the next person did the majority of work, and then the last contractor finished up the last unit. And so it ended up taking this project was supposed to take 4 months. It ended up taking a year and a half because of the contractor mishap. And looking back, one, I should have stuck with the people that were familiar with the 203K loan. And then with the person that did the first contractor, I just messed up on that one. I should have done more research on him. Should have just not even picked him. The second contractor, there was just a lack of communication, I think, on both our parts. So, but I will take responsibility for that. I w- wasn't familiar with what I wanted, right? So this is my first time doing anything with the house. It was a first house, and we're doing this major project. And didn't communicate what I wanted. I didn't know what I wanted. But on his end, also, he didn't ask questions, but probably because he probably wasn't familiar, or maybe didn't work that much with new buyers. I don't know. But I think that if I had been more clear about what I wanted and more involved with being on the site, so I could, and then just give more productive feedback and kind of pad my feedback a little bit, that would have been helpful. So for example, I remember he got upset because he had painted the the emerge the what are they called? The fire escape railings, right? Because they were rusted out. And the siding of the house is blue, and he painted the rails green. And he asked, he was so excited, and he said, "Oh, do you like this?" And I said, "No, because this color doesn't match anything. Like, why isn't it black?" And that's like, I just said it just really quick and just really snappy. And I didn't have to do that, right? I could have had a conversation and say, "Hey, I appreciate that you took the time and the initiative to get this done. Moving forward, I would like for you to just double check with me on colors for things that are going to be visible, because this doesn't match this blue at all. I would have preferred that it be black. Don't worry about changing it, but just moving forward, like, I want to see all of the exterior, all of the finishes that are visible to the eye, right?" That is something that I didn't know that I needed to say at the time, because I had no idea. But of course, now I know it was a big learning experience. It was an expensive learning experience. It was a stressful learning experience, but I am definitely better able to set expectations with contractors ahead of time now, because I know what I do and I don't like. And I pretty much just I want to it's my space that I'm going to be in, so I need to be able to talk to you about what it is that I want and why I want it. And I just didn't realize at the time. I wasn't able to verbalize at the time that that's what I needed. But yeah. So contractor, just my if I were to do it again, I would just go with the contractors that were referred by the consultant, just so I'm working with somebody that knows the mortgage program and then out, and also just set expectations that I need to be part of the project, right? It is my home. I need to consult. Don't just do things on your own, because I will not be happy. So yeah, contractor. And I still, to this day, I don't love working with contractors because of all the drama from that first experience. But in the end, right, once it was done, I increased the value of that house exponentially. And so I would rather deal with, a year and a half of contractor drama, learn how to better work with contractors in the future, and also increase my net worth by 200K. I feel like that was worth the stress of going through it. The other big stressor with the 203K loan was the mortgage application. So, in case you don't know, mortgage applications, the point where you actually apply for a mortgage is when you have your signed contract with your seller and you bring that to the bank. So once I had a contract for an actual house, once I found a house and I submitted that documentation, that is where the actual mortgage application starts. The pre-approval part, that was a breeze. I got pre-approved. My loan officer was amazing. I got my letter quick. He was just on top of things. Once we got to the mortgage application part, everything hit the fan. It was bad. And I mentioned the company that I used was Jersey Mortgage. Absolutely would not recommend them. I don't know if they're still in business, but it's just a no for me. Maybe their regular mortgages are fine, but with the 203K loan, I would not recommend this company at all. So we put an offer and got the offer accepted on the house in February. I did not actually close on the mortgage until July. So March, April, May, June, July. Wait. Yeah, February, March, April, May, June. March, April, May, June, July. So 5 months, took 5 months to get this deal done, which is crazy. Um and in those 5 months, it was uh a lot of being asked to submit the same documents over and over again. And it was extremely stressful. It was my first time getting a house. I wasn't familiar with the whole process. And I would send a whole bunch of paperwork and get it in. And then a couple of days later, next week, saying, "Oh, we need this, or we need this today." And it just seemed like every single day there was just something going on with the house. And it was causing a lot of anxiety, because it's like, until you get everything finished, until you're at the closing table, you don't even know if this house is even going to happen or not. And with 203K loan, in addition to just the regular documents that you're going to need to provide, your W-2, your taxes, your bank statements, in addition to all that, you also need to be submitting all your contractor information that they're asking for. So your contractor's license, your contractor's insurance, and anything else that they're going to need to verify that your contractor is actually a licensed person that can do this job. And so in that 5 months of doing all that, so we're getting all the documents to the lender. You still have to do your inspection with your regular inspector, so not the 203K inspector, right? A regular inspector, at least I did. I got a regular inspector to take a look to see what was wrong with the house. I also had a 203K inspector take a look and then create the document, the report of what needed to be done in the property. So there is a lot more paperwork involved with a 203K loan. And unfortunately, the bank that I worked with was not great of keeping track of all this document, all these moving parts. So like I said, my loan officer was amazing, but once the application started, I actually didn't talk to my loan officer at all. I was talking to the loan processor. So the loan processor is somebody that you don't always work with. It depends on the bank, but the loan processor is gathering all the documents for the loan and making sure it gets to the underwriting department so that they are double checking to make sure that you actually qualify for this um, loan. So the person that I interacted with a lot at this company was a processor. I don't know on the back end, like where the ball was dropping, but they were asking for the same thing over and over again. And again, it took 5 months to close on this house. And every time we'd get to a timeline where, we were supposed to close on a specific date and we had to push that closing date further out, that was just, stressful for me because I'm like, am I actually gonna get this house and why is it taking so long? And that was just, it was a lot. Ron, thank you for hanging out. Ron is saying thank you for sharing. Ron, have you had a 203K loan before? I am curious. Let us know. So the mortgage process itself was just hard. This is the only 203K loan I've done, so I don't know if this is normal or if I just had bad luck with this particular bank. I don't know if it's just a Jersey mortgage thing or if all 203Ks take a long time. I would imagine that even if it was a great bank, it would still take longer than the regular 30 days because there's just a lot of documentation that has to go into place. And you're pretty much getting two different loans rolled into one, right? You're doing the regular processing of your mortgage, but then they're also putting together, what needs to be done in order to get all the funds for your renovation bit and putting that into one. So I understand that it could take longer to get this done, but 5 months just feels like a lot. So if you have gotten a 203K loan, I'm curious, how long did it take you to go from your initial offer being accepted to closing? How long did it take you? Was it less than 5 months, more than 5 months? Let us know in the comments. And along with the mortgage bit, in addition to it taking forever to get to closing, the actual closing. So 3 days before closing, I got my final disclosure, and actually not 3 days, less than that. So I got my disclosure and it had the same interest rate that we had agreed upon, which was for something. And then, excuse me, a couple of days before closing, I get another closing estimate and closing disclosure, and my interest rate had gone up by a percentage point. And I tried to call my processor. She did not respond. I sent her multiple emails. She did not respond. And so I called a friend of mine who uh, bought a lot of houses, was more familiar with the mortgage process. And he said, they cannot do that. That's illegal. You need to go figure that out. And I remember, so I'd never gone to the office for this mortgage company. I had class that night. I skipped class and I drove my butt to wherever it was in New Jersey, an hour and a half drive. And I got to the office and I said, I don't know where Susie is. I need to speak to her boss because here's what's happening. My interest rate has gone up. She's not responding. She's not calling me back. She's not texting me back. This whole thing has been absolutely disorganized. So I'm sitting here until her boss shows up, which is what I did. And because, and again, I don't know what the thought process was of them thinking it was okay to just change the rate and then not have a conversation and think we're gonna just move forward to closing. I don't know why they felt that was okay, but I went to the office and I caused a little bit of a scene. And her boss, I forget his name, talked to me. He explained like something like a balance had gone up on a card or something, and that changed the rate. That's fine, but then you have to have a conversation with me, and it didn't even make sense because I don't know. Anyway, so he honored my original rate, and so we ended up moving forward with closing on this building. And at the actual, so closing is a day where you actually sign all your documents and you get the keys to your house. And this was a whole other experience as well. So when we got to closing, there were documents that were not ready. So the bank had not sent my lawyer or their lawyer what they needed. So we were just sitting around for a while, not knowing whether the documents were coming. When the documents finally arrived, there were documents that were missing, and they had to double click with the bank to send the stuff that was missing. Um, there it was just a mess. So I have done closings after that. I'm a loan signing agent, so I'm a notary. So I actually sign close mortgages with buyers or sellers. And like with buyers, like I'm out in 40 minutes. So 40 minutes we're done, max an hour. And the two other mortgages that I have been a part of, where I am the buyer, I was out of there in under an hour. This closing took about 4 to 5 hours for us to finish this, just because we were waiting for documents from the bank that should have been there. That is unacceptable because the bank should knew exactly what they needed to get done and when and why, and they didn't. So both my lawyer and the seller's lawyer were both a little bit like confused. My lawyer was advising me to he was telling me you need to call them, or you need to, not do, you need to move, walk away from this deal. And for me, being that this was my first house and I had found what I thought was this amazing deal, which it was an amazing deal, I wasn't willing to not get the house because I didn't know if I was going to be able to find another house that cheap in this neighborhood that worked really well. So I just sat there for hours stressed, not sure if I was actually going to be able to leave with, good keys in my hand. I'm there, I'm dressed up, I got my cute outfit, I got my makeup on, I'm ready to take my pictures with my keys, and I'm not even sure if this is going to even happen. It eventually did happen, and I was able to buy that house. Um, I was able to get the keys, and the whole process was just a big stressor. So I mentioned with the contractor, I after I got the keys, after we closed, the biggest stressor was just moving forward with the project with the right contractor. If I had not made the mistake of using a contractor that was not familiar with the process, it probably would have been a lot smoother. But because I was trying to go the cheap route and I picked someone that didn't know what they were doing a couple of times, then it just ended up being this bigger mess than it needed to be. Now, would I do a 203K loan again? I absolutely would get a 203K mortgage again. Yes. Um, do I think any first time home buyer should get a 203K loan? I think it's an amazing product. I think you just need to be uh, careful with who you pick as your contractor as you go into it. That's like the biggest thing. Like, who's your contractor and who is your lender? The lender bit is even like that was stressful, but like that's fine. It's doable. The big thing is just the contractor bit, because if you don't have somebody that's moving on your project quickly, if they take longer than they need to, if you need to switch a contractor, then that's going to cost you time, which means that you are going to end up having to pay a mortgage before your house is ready. So with my 203K loan, I was able to put in 4 months of mortgage payments into the mortgage itself. So I had 4 months of not making payments because in that time the project was supposed to be done. I ended up taking a whole year and a half. And so after those 4 months were done, now I'm paying on this mortgage. I'm also paying for rent. I'm not getting any rental income from this building like I was expecting. And so that ended up spiraling into this whole thing where I ended up having a crappy credit score, right? Because I decided I can't pay my credit cards. It's not a priority. My priority is to pay for my house. And that's what I did. Um, so my big takeaway from my whole 203 loan experience is one, do your research before talking to professionals, right? If I didn't do my research, I would have listened to those lenders that said that I couldn't do it, that were either lying or they didn't know what they were talking about. So do your research and know what you want to do before talking to anybody. Second, pick a contractor that has done the 203K mortgage before. That way they are familiar with the process and they know exactly how it goes. And then pick a good bank. Because man, that lender stress was crazy. And the next mortgage that I did was so smooth. Shout out to Kale Leather at Huntington Mortgage. He did my mortgage after that crazy one. And it was so smooth. And it was just such a stark difference between the Jersey mortgage experience, which was so terrible, and then Kale, he was just a gem. So yes. So 203K loans are amazing. I'm curious. Are you considering a 203K loan? What questions do you have? Drop them in the chat. I, it's something that is absolutely going to help you to increase the equity of the house, which is important, right? If you are buying your house and you want to actually build wealth with this house, you either have to be getting cash from this house every month, you either have to cash flow the house, or you have to get equity. And instead of you just waiting and hoping that equity goes up, if you buy a house that needs work and then you put in the work into that house, you are guaranteeing that you're creating equity with that house, which means that you can actually see that house move you a lot further in your financial stability than if you're just kind of taking the passive route. So 203K loans are amazing. Let me know what questions you have. Drop them in the comments. I will be checking, even if it's after the live. It was such a harrowing experience, but looking back, it wasn't that bad. I made it. And in the end, that house has come through for me. And so I will definitely link to the video that will show you what the results were long term with dealing with that property. So thank you so much for joining, and I will see y'all next week with our next guest. Take care.